A quorum of 25 voters being present, this annual town meeting is called to order. Good evening. If you're still filing in, please find a seat. Welcome and thank you for being here this evening. May the 4th be with you. The first order of business is what I call the preliminaries. This is where I go through some of the basics and explain how we will operate tonight. Town meeting is not the public comment section of a select board or school committee meeting, nor is it a public forum or a public hearing. What town meeting is the legislature for the town of Ashland, and tonight we are sitting in legislative session. Together we collectively approve the town budget, vote on capital purchases, approve bylaws, and more. My name is Adam Schuster, and I'm the moderator. My job as moderator is to serve as the presiding officer of this legislature. I believe that part of my job is also to ensure that those here in attendance understand what is going on. I'll do my best to explain anything out of the ordinary. If at any time you have a question about something, please ask, as there are likely others with the same question. I'll be guided in running town meeting by the 3rd edition of Town Meeting Time, which is published by the Massachusetts Moderators Association and is generally recognized as the authoritative guide to running town meetings in Massachusetts. Joining me at the front of the auditorium are members of the School Committee, Board of Select Board, Finance Committee, Town Council Lisa Mead, Town Manager Michael Herbert, Assistant Town Manager Jen Ball, there's Brittany, Finance Director, Town Accountant Brittany Iacopone, Superintendent Jim Adams. With me on stage, hiding on the other side, is Town Clerk Cindy Livingstone. Sitting next to Cindy is soon-to-be Deputy Town Clerk Chris Sullivan. Chris will get his intro to town meeting by operating the time clock tonight. So welcome to Ashland, Chris. This meeting is being broadcast live and recorded for later rebroadcast on WACA-TV. Welcome to those of you watching us at home. When you checked in this evening, you received a blue index card. It is important that you hang on to this card, as you will not be able to vote without it. Because votes will be counted based on the display of cards, non-voters and members of the press may sit anywhere in the auditorium, but there is a seating crunch tonight, so you may have to hunt for a seat. I will generally be able to determine the results of each vote by a simple show of cards. In the event I am unable to do so, we have tellers that will perform an actual vote count. Tonight's tellers have already been sworn in. Please ensure that you've turned all cell phones and other electronic devices to mute. If you must take or make a phone call during these proceedings, please leave the auditorium to do so. The warrant that was posted and for which we are working tonight constitutes a notice or warning to all voters of what we will discuss tonight. Town meeting can only take action within the scope of an article on the posted warrant. Similarly, any discussion is also limited to the scope of the articles on the posted warrant. Town meeting acts on motions. If there isn't a motion before town meeting, no action, including discussion, can take place. In order to allow for discussion, I will entertain a motion and a second for that motion after each article has been introduced and explained, but before discussion commences. Once the motion has been made and seconded, it is subject to amendments from the floor. The procedures for amending an article are listed at the back of your handbook in the section titled Selected Town Meeting Procedures. If you have a question or comment during discussion of an article, please make your way to one of the 2 microphones and wait to be recognized. After being recognized, please state your name and state your name and address, and direct all your comments to the moderator. Please keep your comments brief and ensure they relate directly to the article being discussed. If you are unable to get to one of the microphones, please raise your hand, and I will have a microphone brought to you when it's your turn to speak. Unless you're way up there, the mics only go so far. To ensure that we are able to hear from the greatest number of people, each speaker will be limited to 1 90-second turn at the microphone during discussion of each article. Speakers may return to the microphone for a second time once all others wishing to speak have done so, but that second turn will be limited to 1 minute. Frequency limits will not apply to discussion of the annual budget, but time limits will. If you are responding to a question, please do so through the moderator. There should be no direct discussion between parties at town meeting. I don't expect this to be an issue tonight, but I'll say it anyway. All debate is to be conducted in a respectful and courteous manner. No comments of a personal nature are to be made. Rude behavior, especially shouting, bullying, and personal attacks, will not be tolerated. Anyone unwilling or unable to comply with this rule will be removed. I'd also ask that everyone refrain from applause and similar outbursts during discussion, except after we adjourn. With just 11 articles in the warrant, I see no reason that we can't complete our business this evening. I'll do my best to keep things moving along, but ultimately the length of town meeting is up to all of you in the audience. A couple announcements. First off, there is a vacancy on the Finance Committee, Anyone who is interested should submit a talent bank form on the town's website by the close of business this Friday, so the day after tomorrow. Annual elections are 2 weeks from yesterday. What people don't often realize is that the results of municipal elections have more direct impact on our daily lives than the results of either state or federal elections. Yet turnout for Ashland's municipal elections generally runs only in the low to mid-teens. It's important for everyone to understand that your vote matters. As always, I'm predicting a beautiful day with nothing but sunny skies on May 17th. So I'd urge everyone to get out and vote, and when you do, take a neighbor or two with you. Everyone votes here at the high school, and polls are open from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. If you are unable to vote in person, absentee ballots are available from the town clerk's office, but requests must be made by May 11th. Close of business? 5 o'clock? 5 p.m. on May 11th. Moderator's motions. The moderator's motions are listed in your handbook on page 4. They are the same standard motions we approve each town meeting, so I'll ask to address them as a group. Do I have a motion to approve the moderator's motions 1, 2, 3, and 4 as printed in the handbook? Is there a second? All in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed. That passes. On to our business for the night. Article 1, hear town reports. We have 4 reports tonight. First, we'll hear from Joe Mignani from the Public Safety Building Committee for an update on the public safety building. Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and good evening. I'd love to give the town of Ashland residents a brief update of the new public safety building that's currently being constructed at 1216 Union Street. As you can see, the building is moving rather quickly, and it's looking very nice right now. A lot of the outside exterior work has been completed. We're about maybe 85% of the way done with the building itself. We still have some minor delays when it comes to materials and ordering materials, which sometimes will delay the opening, which is unfortunate. But fortunately for us, this is the first time that it finally caught up to us with ordering supplies and having back orders. So with that said, Michael, if you would be so kind, turn around and see what we have here. This was the initial site work. It took a good portion of last year to get the site work done, and we had some water issues, but those have been corrected and amended, and we appreciate all the hard work that CTA, HKT, and Vertex has done for this project. And we can, if you want to go to the next slide, that would be great. These are the bays. One of the things that we wanted to do real quickly was that we wanted to have all the equipment for fire and police in one location. So that way it was centrally located. We didn't have to go from point A to point B to point C to gather the necessary equipment to fight fires or whatever was needed. So everything will be centrally located in this building, and everything will be undercover and not exposed to the elements. This was one of the big reasons why we needed to have this sort of building. Next, please. As you see, this is the exterior of the management portion of the building. This will house the management departments of the police and fire, and day-to-day operations with respect to both departments. Next. And this is the interior inside of the bay apparatus area, the equipment area for storage. This building is built with the understanding that it would be at least a 55 or 60 year usage, and we built it for growth. So unlike the former police station, when we first moved in back in 1978, it was already too small when we moved in. So this building is designed and built for growth, and hopefully it will serve this town well over the next 55 plus years. This is the committee working on design, exterior designs and materials. We wanted to make sure that it was aesthetically sound and fit the criteria of the downtown area, especially with the reconstruction of the downtown area and some of the newer buildings that we have downtown alongside with the new high school, the current high school here. So it'll be aesthetically sound and looking to everybody. It won't be sticking out like a sore thumb. And I think that's about it. So if you have any questions with respect to that, feel free to give myself a call, or we have an email address. It's publicsafetybuilding@ashland.com, and we're on the website. And we do weekly updates on the town site website under the Ashland Public Safety Building. And so if there's any additional information you need, it's always posted on that website. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. And thank you, Ashland.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is Paul Kendall of the Minnis Building Committee to provide an update on the progress of that project. Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We've had a heck of a year, so brevity is not my strength, but I'll try my best to keep it in the time frame. So you can go to the next one. So look, whoop, there you go. So first wanted to go over some of the previous milestones we had. So back in January 2021 is when we had our town meeting and ballot votes to approve the funding for the project. That was about a year into COVID or so, something like that. We were still enjoying the benefits from from COVID during construction. The public safety certainly got the benefit of that during their bids. And then we turned to May, September, November, and that's when the construction market really took a lot of turns. We had a lot of challenges during those, so I highlighted those different times. That's when we did our different estimates. Our May estimate, we had to do 43 value engineering changes to keep the project going, another 22 in September, and we had to release our roofing package early in November due to some of the challenges we faced. And the remaining bids went out in January of 2022. So you can go to the next slide. So we broke ground in November. So in November, December is when we did the preliminary site clearing, securing the perimeter, installing our access road. We had a groundbreaking ceremony in December, followed by January and February. We did a lot of the mass exporting of soils, our blasting and processing the rock. And then in March, we awarded the GMP and started our foundations. The GMP, for those unfamiliar with the process, we did a construction manager at risk, so that GMP is essentially similar to the awarding of the general contract for the general project construction manager that the public safety building did. So, if you want to continue? So now we'll go into some of the images. So this was the start of site work. You'll see we've cleared things. We started processing the rock and we're doing the blasting. Go to the next slide. So this is just up there to give you a framework for the next couple of images. As we're still in foundations, this will help guide what we're looking at for those images. If you're looking at this is the footprint of the new building. It is directly behind the existing building. So you can go to the next one. So this is, you'll see the star up here. This is where this picture is taken from. So the gym area is here. That tall area back here is a retaining wall. That's the kitchen area and a cafeteria that's built back into that wall. So this kind of gives you the idea of where the gym is here. So you can go to the next image. So this is taken right by the front entrance. This area right here, this will be the clock tower that you've seen in the images, and the main entrance will be right here. And you can see over here, this is where the gymnasium would be sticking out, and the cafeteria and those things. So if you continue on, this is at the corner of the admin wing, looking back on the entrance and down that wall of the admin right there. These other things on the interior are all footings for the structural supports. The steel will be going up on those, and then the slab will be poured after that. So this picture is taken from right here within kind of the center of the building. So back behind the camera here to the right would be this interior courtyard area. This right here that's sticking up is the well for the elevator pit. So you're looking back towards this retaining wall, the gymnasium's up in front here. So here are some other images. When we're doing those pours, this is what it looks like. They use a pumper. They bring the concrete in, put it in the pumper so they can direct it at the right areas and things like that. This is an aerial, kind of shows you the where it is in relation to the current building with that foundation area there. Go to the next slide. So what does that mean going forward? So the structural steel erection will begin May 16th. We will have a steel topping off ceremony. That does not mean that steel will be done on June 13th, but it'll be a beam raising ceremony. It'll be roughly 80 to 90% complete by that point. Substantially complete. The building will be substantially complete. We'll begin moving in July of 2023, followed by our start of our opening for students is in September 2023, so that fall start of school. That is a busy summer for us. We'll be both moving into the new building, but we'll also be demolishing the ends of the old building and finishing the front parent drop-off and things like that. So that's a very important time for us. It is a date that we have to hit, so if you'll hear us talk about ways we need to expedite schedule, we cannot afford the delays at all, because if we miss that, we do not open that year. And then, like I said, it's open to students in September of 2023 while they continue to demolish the building and finish the front fields and the playground areas through the summer of 2024. And I would be remiss not to thank everyone involved in this. To say the last year has been challenging would be a gross understatement. We have faced challenges that are just unprecedented, and the support from the staff, the town, the committees, our partners in Compass, Flansburgh, and Shawmut have been just amazing to allow us to keep going within our total project budget. And so I just want to say thank you to everybody for all the support. It has been one heck of a year, but the project's going, and we're excited to be at this point. And so if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to the committee, go to our Facebook page, or reach out in any way. We're always there. And I would expect once we get to a certain point, I'll be talking to the team about potentially having site walks for the community to be able to get on site prior to the opening as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Next, the report from the school committee and Chair Laurie Tosti.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This one. Good evening, everybody. I wanted to share with you a few details about how we arrive at the budget requests that we're making this evening. Our budget is a document that reflects our values, and we get to those value statements by creating a strategic plan. We look to our mission and our vision and our core values, and every decision that we make needs to trace back to that. And the budget process takes months. Administrators work starting the beginning of the year. Really, it's all year long. And when they are ready, they start meeting with the school committee. We have multiple meetings, and then we get to what we are presenting. Ashland Public Schools, next slide, please, Michael. We have 468 employees, 260 full-time teachers. We have 5 schools. The percentage of special education is 17.4. Our cost per student is $13,691. Our enrollment is 2,838, and we have 236 English language learners speaking multiple languages in our school system. Next slide, please. Budget changes over last year. We have the change that happens every year as a result of our contracts. That is a yearly increase, so that's what you'll see on the first line. We have student services increase. We have some new personnel, which I'll share the details with you in a minute. Increase in general transportation, facilities expenses, curriculum expenses, and then we also have some additions with the ESSER funds to help provide some relief during this COVID time. Next slide, please. We'll share with you how we've used those funds. We had 2 summers worth of summer learning academies for learning loss. We've hired 5 additional middle school teachers due to the increased enrollment at the middle school. And we've increased the nursing staff and the counseling staff to meet the needs of the students related to the pandemic. Next slide, please. Thank you. Per pupil spending, this has been the case since I came onto the school committee, and it's been more than a decade now. And it's something that we're really proud of. Ashland spends $13,691 per pupil, which is at the bottom of this list that you're seeing here, while we're getting top results. Now, this comparison is between not only just local districts to us, but districts that are like Ashland in terms of demographics and enrollment. So very efficient in terms of what we're spending, and we're always doing very well. If you pay attention to the lists that come out in U.S. News and World Reports or the Boston Magazine or wherever, Ashland is always performing much higher than what you might think just by looking at this list. So being very efficient with your all of our tax dollars. Here's a chart that just shows the student enrollment. Our enrollment has been increasing all along, except for a dip during the COVID period. And then, of course, when enrollment increases, it also impacts special education, ELL requirements, class sizes, and how we use our space. Next slide, please. English language learners, we now have 236. A few years ago, I remember sitting with the Finance Committee and the Select Board just talking about finances, and at that time, we were not considered a high incidence district because we had fewer than 100 students that were English language learners, and now we have 236 and getting more all the time. And it's brought a lot of wonderful diversity to our community and to our schools. And also, you know, we've had to meet their needs, and so it does impact the budget. The budget request this year, in addition to what we needed last year, included a counselor, an ELL position at Warren School, a middle school nurse, special education teacher, an ELL teacher at the high school, an increase for some needs for student services, and curriculum needs, including dyslexia screening and some math support, as well as building and maintenance needs, some filters. And across the district, we have hired a director of ELL and a data specialist. And then finally, we just wanted to share with you that due to budget constraints, we can't meet all of our needs. And yet we don't ever stop talking about them or trying to find ways to get these very important requests into our budget. They continue to be goals of ours. We continue to try to be creative. Nothing on here is, you know, a crazy wish list. We're talking nurses and teachers, paraprofessionals, increasing electives at the high school. Our facilities and maintenance really never bounced back from the recession. We're still trying to work towards that, and some literacy support and some coaching, as well as some physical education support. So you can always contact me. I'm the current chair, as well as the entire school committee. The information is there. Our budget is online if you want more specific details, and we're always happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. And finally, we have Town Manager Michael Herbert with a short Town Manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, everyone. First, I want to take an opportunity to thank you for attending tonight, taking time out of your busy schedules to attend and participate. What I'm going to try to do tonight is actually squeeze a couple of different presentations into one, so I'll have to shorten each one. The first one is an update on previous warrant articles that were before town meeting and which were passed, and then I'll move on to a very brief budget presentation moving forward. First, I want to give everybody an update on the Downtown Streetscape project. This is a project that was passed in 2019. As you can tell, a lot of construction has been happening downtown. I'm sure many of you have felt it. If not, you haven't felt it, then your cars have probably felt it. That's because they've been doing a lot of work with putting the utility infrastructure up underground. Eventually, what's going to happen is all of the utility poles will be buried underneath. So we'll have a nice, clean, and climate-resilient energy infrastructure and telecommunications infrastructure moving forward. That is now substantially complete. We will be moving this summer to some of the more aesthetic elements of this project, including the curbing, the sidewalks, and I think most importantly for everybody here, the paving in 2022. And then in 2023, we hope to finish this project by completing building connections in the underground infrastructure, and then finally the removal of the poles. Next, I want to give you an update on the Pond Street project, which again was passed in 2019. A lot of the underground utility work has been completed along the 2-mile stretch of this project, running from the Holliston to the Framingham line. The continuing work that you see includes drainage improvements, realignment of Algonquin with Harvard Street, the building of the retaining wall and the roundabout, and then also continuing road work will happen throughout this year and through the basically the limits of 2023. Despite the pandemic, we have been able to get a couple of projects completed, some that I think we're very proud about. First of all, the Sudbury Riverwalk trail opened in the summer of 2020. That was a project that was passed in 2017. As you can see here, there's a nice pedestrian bridge, which I think has become somewhat of a landmark for town now, especially in the fall. And then also the Trolley Brook Trail, which was passed in 2020, I believe, actually opened December 2021. This happened very, very quickly. It's probably one of the faster municipal projects that we've seen. And that's basically because a lot of the roadway, or not the roadway, but the trail was already set up for us being an old trolley bed, excuse me. And then some of the other smaller projects that we've completed include Town Hall steps, and thanks in large part to the work at DPW, the Mill Pond Park has been completed. So now I want to move briefly into our operating budget for fiscal year 2023. This year's budget, 2023 budget in the general fund is $72,581,000. It's a $3 million increase over the previous year, which represents a 4.39% change. That includes revenue and expenses. As you see here, some of the larger changes include excluded debt service and also some of our school choice sending tuition as well. We'll get into those details later. This shows some of our enterprise funds, or all of our enterprise funds, I should say. The water enterprise fund will be going up 6.82%. The sewer enterprise fund, 4.64%. That is without a rate increase on the sewer fund, I should say. The trash collection increase is 14.89%, and that is in large part due to the trash contract that we have had to recently renewed after going out to bid. The field management expenditures change negative 43%. The cable access enterprise fund changes by being reduced $65,000, and then the stormwater budget increases by a little over $7,000. In all total, across all funds, the general fund and the enterprise funds combined, we see an $83,585,000 increase, or excuse me, budget, which is a $3.9 million increase, or 4.89% increase. As we were developing our budget this year, we had set aside some goals for 2023. Our first one was to support our existing projects through proper staffing and funding. We have a whole host of projects which I'll get into in the next slide, but our main concern right now is making sure that we support those and make sure that they're completed correctly. Another thing that we're trying to do is help ensure the retention of our great staff. We have a wonderful staff, a great great group of employees. We're trying to not be subject to the Great Resignation, which is plaguing a lot of private and public enterprises across the nation. And we wanted to do this with no override. And I think more importantly, we wanted to keep Ashland one of the best values in Metro West, and that's according to objective metrics. Ms. Tosti noted the per pupil expenditures in the school department and how efficiently and how effectively they use those funds. We try to mirror that in the municipal departments as well. Some of those existing capital initiatives include the public safety building in the Mendez School, which were previously covered, as well as downtown and 126. We also have a number of other projects as well, including projects within the Warren District, including the Warren Barn, the Valentine property, Phase 2 of the Riverwalk, which will be a direct connection from the Sudbury Riverwalk to the MBTA train station, the Quiet Zone in downtown and Cherry Street, which should reduce the number of whistles that go through as the trains blow, reduce the number of whistles that the trains blow as they go through town, Cadillac paint, a strategic plan. We have a number of bridges that need to be upgraded and fixed, and then as well as continue work on the Upper Charles Trail. Part of the way we're going to achieve these goals is we looked at enhancing our staffing this year. First, we looked at a project manager and procurement person who will help us with all of these capital projects. We also added a senior accountant and financial analyst position. We're adding a deputy fire chief in the fire department, as well as a DPW engineer / project manager. And just going to the point of that efficiency and trying to be a great value for taxpayers here in Ashland, this is a graph that notes our expenditures per capita. So this is how much we spend per person. And this is comparing us to the 13 communities within the Metro West region. And as you see, we're third from the bottom at $4,474 per person. This is about as objective a metric as I think we can find in terms of measuring efficiency. And I think we're doing a pretty good job, although we can always work on doing better. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. There being no vote required, we'll move on to Article 2. Transfer from the General Stabilization Fund sponsored by the town manager. To see if the town will vote to transfer available funds from the General Stabilization Fund to support the FY23 general fund budget, or pass any vote or take any action relative thereto. The Finance Committee recommends the town meeting approve the transfer of $450,000 from the General Stabilization Fund to defray charges and expenses of the town, including debt and interest for the ensuing fiscal year as set forth in the FY23 general fund budget. Mr. Herbert.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you. As noted in the article itself, we're looking at transferring $450,000 from our rainy day stabilization fund to support the operating budget this year. This is the third and final year of a 3-year plan that we developed in conjunction with the Select Board, the FinCom, and the School Committee at the outbreak of COVID, where we looked at supplementing our revenues utilizing the rainy day stabilization fund. The first year we drew $1.4 million from our stabilization fund. The next year we stepped that down to $900,000. This year we're looking at stepping it down again to $450,000, which will then go down to zero in FY24. Although we've made withdrawals from the stabilization fund, we've actually made deposits as well during the fall. And as such, our balance in 23, before we put any more money in during the fall town meeting, is $7.4 million, which is it's a little over 10% of our operating budget, which is in line with our financial policies and goals.
To allow discussion, I'll entertain a motion that the town approve the transfer of $450,000 from the General Stabilization Fund to defray charges and expenses of the town, including debt and interest, for the ensuing fiscal year as set forth in the FY23 general fund budget. Do I have such a motion? Discussion. Seeing none, we'll move to an immediate vote. This will require a 2/3 majority. All those in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed? That passes unanimously. Article 3, fiscal year 2023 budget. Somebody didn't update their notes, and that would be me. Sponsored by the town manager, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate from available funds and or transfer from available funds in the treasury such sums of money as are necessary to defray charges and expenses of the town, including debt and interest for the ensuing fiscal year, or pass any vote or take any action relative thereto. As is our custom, we will now hear from the Finance Committee's report from Scott Warnetsky, Chair of the Finance Committee. Mr. Warnetsky.
Thank you, Adam. And by way of introductions, as Adam mentioned, my name is Scott Warnetsky. I'm the Chair of the Finance Committee. With me today, Jonathan Moore, Vice Chair, and member Ryan Turncliffe. And I thought I'd provide, oh, Ed snuck in here. Hi, Ed. And to start, I thought I'd provide an overview of kind of how we're constituted and what our responsibilities are. We are a volunteer committee. We are appointed by our town moderator and serve 3-year terms that are staggered. There are 7 members that are constituted to this committee. As Adam mentioned, we do have 1 vacancy, and he urged folks to file a talent bank form if you're so interested in serving on the committee. I will add that there is no financial experience necessary to serve on the Finance Committee. There are some finance people like myself, but there are scientists, there are attorneys, there are contractors, so we welcome all points of view, and if you're so interested, please submit that talent bank form. As far as the responsibilities of the Finance Committee, we are the authorizing body for expenditures from the reserve fund. These are designated funds within the budget that are set aside for extraordinary expenditures. And typically, this fund, which is in the budget today that we'll be voting on, go to typically fund snow and ice deficits at the end of the year. Our other primary responsibility is to consider all articles within the town warrant, both at spring town meeting as well as fall town meeting. What we primarily are is an advisory body to you, to town meeting. We deliberate and provide a report as to our recommendations for each article brought before the Finance Committee. And town meeting is the body that would approve those articles. In order to provide our recommendations, we meet with public officials, town management, to understand the financial implications of each article to the town's finances today and into the future. One of the larger warrant articles that we have to deal with, and we're talking about tonight, is the annual budget. And to do our diligence, we meet with department heads to understand their detailed budget requests for the particular year. You may have seen us on television. This is our 1 televised meeting where we meet in late January or early February to go in depth on some of these budgets. And when meeting with these town officials, we strive to understand what they view as necessary and necessary to effectively run their departments. I will say that their requests don't always make it into the budget. When Michael and his staff bring all the budgets together, sometimes there just isn't room. But as Michael mentioned today, there are some requests that are making it into this budget. And as a Finance Committee, we ensure that, number one, that the town has the ability to fund these positions today, but also has the ability to continually fund these positions and into the future, and has a plan to incorporate these positions into future budgets. So overall, for town finances, the town remains in excellent financial health. We continue to maintain an uninsured AAA credit rating. And this is all due to the prudent financial management of the town, adherence to our long-established reserve policies, and maintenance of strong reserve levels. Michael mentioned we've dipped into the stabilization fund in the past couple of years due to the pandemic. We're able to replenish those funds plus more at fall town meeting. And again, we're asking, according to the plan we made a couple of years ago, to go into that stabilization fund. And as Michael mentioned, we're proud to say that we're still able to maintain our target of 10% of general fund expenditures in that balance, even after that now approved withdrawal from the stabilization fund. So in the end, the Finance Committee, we endeavor to sponsor and encourage policies that will support the town in essence, maintaining a strong fiscal policy, today and in the years to come. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Scott. Voting on the budget is a two-step process. First, we will review and vote on the appropriations for each of the various accounts. After action has been taken on all the accounts, we will vote on the overall budget motion. I will start by reading the numbers and names of a series of accounts. If you have a question or comment on a particular item, yell out "hold." After voting on all unchallenged line items, we will go back and discuss any that were held. Account 1123, Town Manager. Account 1138, Central Purchasing. Account 1139, Telecommunications. Account 1151, Town Council. Account 1155, Data Processing. Account 1161, Town Clerk. Account 1162, Elections Town Meeting. Account 1163, Board of Registrars. Account 1180, Human Resources. All those in favor of the unchallenged items, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed? Those all pass. Account 1135, Town Accountant. Account 1141, Assessor's Office. Account 1145, Treasurer. All those in favor of the unchallenged items, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed? They all pass unanimously. 1171, Conservation Commission. 1172, Open Space Committee. 1175, Planning Board. 1241, Inspectional Services Department. All those in favor of the unchallenged items, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed? Those all pass unanimously. 1210, Police Department. 1220, Fire Department. All those in favor of the unchallenged items, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed? Those pass unanimously. 1510, Health Department. 1543, Veteran Services. 1544, Human Services. 1610, Public Library. All those in favor of the unchallenged items, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed? Those all pass unanimously. 1192, Public Buildings and Property Maintenance. 1421, DPW Administration. 1422, Highway. 1423, Snow and Ice Removal. 1424, Highway Street Lighting. 1429, Highway Combined Fuel. 1491, Cemetery Parks and Trees. All those in favor of the unchallenged items, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed? Those all pass unanimously. 1300, School Department. 1399, Keefe Tech Vocational School. All those in favor of the unchallenged items, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed? That passes, but not unanimously. 1710, Total Debt. All those in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed? That passes unanimously. A quick note before we get to the capital projects line. The capital projects listed in the handbook are anticipated to be funded under the account 1930 appropriation. The appropriation we are about to make is not for the individual items listed, but rather for the account 1930 in total. As such, the individual items listed in your handbook are not subject to amendment. Account 1930, capital projects. All those in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed? That passes, but not unanimously. 1911, employee retirement. 1912, workers' compensation. 1913, unemployment compensation. 1915, group health insurance. 1945, other insurance. 1960, salary contingency. 1132, reserve fund. All those in favor of the unchallenged items, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed? Those pass unanimously. Enterprise funds, 6,000 water enterprise, 6,100 sewer enterprise, 6,200 trash collection, 6,300 field management, 6,400 cable access, 6,500 stormwater. All those in favor of the unchallenged items, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed? That passes, but not unanimously. We've approved the individual line items in the budget. Now we need to approve the overall funding mechanism. For that, I'll entertain a motion. For the general fund, that the following amounts be transferred from the respective accounts. EMS revolving, $200,000. Sale of cemetery lots, $30,000. Dog licenses, $25,000. Recreation revolving, $12,796. That the balance be raised and appropriated, $70,181,626. For the water enterprise fund, that $3,108,623 be raised to the water rates. For the sewer enterprise fund, that $6,119,034 be raised through the sewer rates. For the rubbish collection enterprise fund, that $1,666,972 be raised to the solid waste rates. For the fields management enterprise fund, that $99,228 be raised to the fees for field usage. For the cable access enterprise fund, that $582,000 be raised through the cable franchise fees. For the stormwater enterprise fund, $331,471 be raised through stormwater rates. For the economic development special revenue fund, that $274,025 be appropriated from available meals tax funds. Do I have such a motion? This will require a simple majority. All those in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed? That passes, but not unanimously. We have an official budget for FY23. Article 4, capital authorization sponsored by the town manager. To see if the town will vote to raise, appropriate, transfer from available funds in the Treasury and/or borrow funds and/or reauthorize previously authorized borrowed funds in order to fund a portion of the capital plan, and if a borrowing that any premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, lest any such premium applied to the payment of the costs of the issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved by this vote in accordance with General Law, Chapter 44, Section 20, thereby reducing the amount to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount, or pass any vote or take any action relative thereto. The Finance Committee recommends the town raise, appropriate, transfer available funds, and/or reauthorize previously authorized borrowed funds in order to fund a portion of the capital plan as detailed in the handbook. Mr. Herbert.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As you can see, that we're looking at authorizing $1.7 million in capital expenditures for two purposes. The first being the girls and boys locker rooms at the middle school for $200,000, and then also a new tower truck for the fire department at $1.5 million. I will say the fire truck is a big expenditure, but it's one that's very, very necessary as our current fire truck is over 20 years old. To do this, we're not looking at just borrowing new and authorizing new debt, but we're looking at some of the balances that were remaining from older capital projects and reauthorizing them for these new purchases so that we don't have to borrow as much and burden the taxpayer anymore.
To allow discussion, I'll entertain a motion that the town vote to appropriate $1.7 million in order to fund the following capital projects: girls and boys locker rooms, middle school, $200,000, fire tower truck, $1.5 million. And to pay for said appropriation, the treasurer is authorized, with approval of the select board, to borrow $1,435,908 under and pursuant to General Law, Chapter 44, Section 7(1), or any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore, and further to reallocate $264,092.27 previously borrowed for the projects described below, which amounts are no longer needed to pay costs for the projects for which they were initially borrowed, to pay costs of the projects described above. The 2017 PA system Mindes, $75,050. 2017 tech upgrades to the Ashland Public Schools, $3,040.51. 2018 bathroom renovation to the Mendez School, $75,344.05. 2018 House Street sidewalk, $109,223.54. 2018 boiler replacement at the Warren School, $1,407.17. And 2019 two modulars at the Warren School, $27. Do I have such a motion?
Second.
Discussion.
Mr. Moderator, just to clarify, you said the PA at Mendez is at the middle school. Just want to make sure that's clear.
It says PA system Mendez, parentheses, in middle school. Okay, so it's the middle school.
It's middle school. We're not putting money in it.
My mistake.
What?
My mistake.
No worries. It doesn't matter. We're taking money back as opposed to spending it anyway. Thank you, Mr. Kendall. Seeing no discussion, this will require 2/3 votes because it involves borrowing. All those in favor, please raise your blue cards. Thank you very much. And opposed? I declare 2/3. Article 5, transfer to the OPEB Trust, sponsored by the Select Board. To see if the town will transfer $275,000 from the OPEB contribution account to the OPEB Trust, or pass any vote or take any action relative thereto. The Finance Committee recommends the town so vote. Mr. Herbert.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. That means retiree health insurance. What we have decided to do back in 2015 was to establish what is known as an OPEB trust account, so we can start putting away money to pay for this liability as it comes due. We have a couple of different approaches to funding this. One is through free cash. The other, and the one that we're asking for town meeting to vote on today, is a transfer from our operating budget of $275,000 to that OPEB trust.
Thank you, Mr. Herbert. To allow discussion, I'll entertain a motion that the town transfer the sum of $275,000 from OPEB contribution account 01915-51709 to the OPEB trust account 88100-49710. Do I have such a motion?
Second.
Discussion. I can't get a microphone that far.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you for pointing that out. My apologies. No, town manager's apologies. So, discussion. Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. This will require a simple majority. All those in favor of the motion on Article 5, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed? That passes unanimously. Article 6, increase the economic development budget, sponsored by the Select Board. To see if the town will vote to approve a transfer of $60,000 from economic development fund balance to the economic development account. The Finance Committee recommends the town transfer the sum of $60,000 from economic development fund balance. Mr. Herbert.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So this, again, this motion speaks for itself. We're looking at transferring money from the Economic Development Fund, which is funded through the meals tax, to a couple of lines in the Economic Development account. One is to pay for our business incentive program, and the other is to go into the salary account.
Thank you, Mr. Herbert. To allow discussion, I'll entertain a motion. The town transfer $60,000 from Economic Development Fund Balance Account 29200-35900 to the Economic Development Account 29200-57020 for $40,000 and account 29200-51100 for $20,000. Do I have just a motion? Discussion. Seeing none, we'll move to a vote, which will require a simple majority. All those in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed? That passes unanimously. Article 7, the first of our two consent articles. the annual consent article general. To see if the town will vote the following consent articles, which I shall not read in their entirety: grant program authorization, road contracts, contracts in excess of 3 years, lease purchase agreements, revolving funds, grant easements. The Finance Committee recommends the town approve Article 7 as set forth in the warrant, and further, the town set the maximum amount that may be spent on revolving funds in subsection 5 of Article 7. Given the routine nature of the items contained within consent articles, they are normally voted without discussion. As such, I will ask for a motion and then move directly to a vote. I'm looking for a motion that the town approve Article 7 as set forth in the warrant, and further, that the town set the maximum amount that may be spent on revolving funds in subsection 5 of Article 7 as follows: Senior Program Revolving, $25,000. Community Center Rental, $25,000. Town of Holliston Animal Control Revolving, $76,000. Library Materials Replacement, $1,500. Hazardous Waste Revolving, $15,000. Sidewalk Construction Fund, $50,000. Guidance Revolving Fund, $40,000. Food Inspection Program, $45,000. Electrical Inspections and Gas Inspection Revolving Fund, $225,000. Tobacco Program Revolving, $15,000. Ambulance Revolving, $625,000. Do I have such a motion? This will require 2/3 majority due to the inclusion of easements. All those in favor, please raise your blue cards. Thank you. And opposed? That passes unanimously. The second of our 2 consent articles. Annual consent article, Community Preservation Act, sponsored by the Community Preservation Committee. See, the town will vote the following items: Community Preservation Funds, FY23 annual appropriations. From FY23 estimated revenues to committee administrative expense, $83,637. From FY23 estimated revenues to Historic Resources Reserve, to Community Housing Reserve, and to Open Space Reserve, $158,910 each. And from FY23 estimated revenues to undesignated budgeted reserve, $1,112,369. Oak Street bond payment to appropriate $148,275. High school athletic fields bond payment to appropriate $314,475. Warren Woods bond payment to appropriate $156,562 from the following accounts: Historic Resources Reserve, $50,000, Open Space Reserve, $42,372, Undesignated Budgeted Reserve, $67,190. Valentine Estate to appropriate $46,836 from the following accounts: Open Space Reserve, $6,693, Undesignated Budgeted Reserve, $40,143, or pass any vote or take any action relative thereto. The Community Preservation Committee recommends the town so vote. The Finance Committee recommends the town approve the CPC consent article as set forth in Article 8. As with Article 7, due to the routine and recurring nature of this article, I will ask for a motion and then move directly to a vote. I'm looking for a motion that the town approve the CPC consent article as set forth in Article 8. Do I have such a motion?
Second.
This will require a simple majority. All those in favor, please raise your blue cards. Thank you. And opposed? That passes, but not unanimously. An introductory note: the next 2 articles deal with the same subject matter, Articles 9 and 10. The citizen petition in Article 10 was submitted before there was certainty that Article 9 will be included on the warrant. Since Article 9 incorporates all of the language from the citizen petitions article, Article 10 is essentially moot. Because of this, once final action has been taken on Article 9, I will bring forward Article 10 and seek an immediate motion to dismiss it. Article 9. Amend bylaw, amend demolition delay bylaw for historically or architecturally significant property, sponsored by the Historical Commission. To see if the town of Ashland will vote to amend the Town General Bylaws, Chapter 125, demolition delay bylaw for historically or architecturally significant buildings, as is written in the handbook, because there's no way I'm reading this. Please note that there is a misprint in the warrant. It's not technically a misprint, it's an absence of some highlighted information. If you look at section 125-5, 2/3 of the way down, it says No building permit shall be issued with respect to any premises upon which significant building has been voluntarily demolished in violation of this bylaw for a period of 5 years. It actually reads 2 now and is being changed to 5. That was not identified specifically in the warrant. It doesn't change the article. It's just an editor's mark that is missing, so our apologies for that. Or pass any vote or take any action relative thereto. The Finance Committee defers its recommendation to town meeting. Mr. Nielsen of the Historical Committee.
Good evening, everybody. Jim Nielsen, 35 Ramblewood Drive, the Ashland Historical Commission. We support this motion based on the fact that we feel that the town needs a stronger demolition delay bylaw. Specifically, the 9 months that is currently existing, we feel does not, it's not strong enough. We've seen a number of buildings and developers go through the motions of trying to abide by the bylaw, and in 9 months, it pretty much built into their calculations. We feel that with this addition to the bylaw, these several additions, of which the first is that rather than be anything before January 1940, a permit for demolition of a building shall be 50 years prior from whatever year. So this is going forward, not just before 1940, but 50 years prior to the date that they're asking for the permit. So be changed to 50 years. Also, after a public hearing, the commission determines that the significant building should be preferentially preserved. The commission shall so notify the building inspector in writing that working days of the hearing, no demolition permit may be issued for 12 months after the date of the determination by the commission. That's replacing the 9 months. For a building up to 100 years old, After 100 years old, if it's older than 100 years old, we want 24 months for a demolition delay. So anything over 100 years old, instead of 12 months, it will be a 24-month period of a demolition delay. Also changing, as the moderator mentioned, the violation, if there is a violation of the bylaw, extending the period from 2 years to 5 years from the date of the completion of the demolition, and included in any and all remedies that may be deemed necessary noted above, explicitly available. Further hearing, the length of time for the demo delay may be told or extended if the owner is found not to have made a good faith effort described in 125-3, the responsibility of the owners. This, we find, may be a further deterrent for somebody to just come in and decide they're just going to knock down the building and wait the town out. We feel that gives it a little more strength. Also, for further clarity, we put in, for further clarity, any building permit which proposes such changes to the historic features or elements of a building or structure may be determined to fall under this definition. Again, historically or architecturally significant building will mean any building in whole or part which was built 50 years prior. And that's what I have.
Okay, thank you very much. To allow discussion, I'll entertain a motion that the town update the town bylaws, Chapter 125, demolition delay bylaw for historically or architecturally significant buildings as presented in Article 9. Do I have such a motion? Before I start discussion, I'm anticipating a healthy, robust discussion, which is perfectly appropriate. I'm expecting a lot of substitute motions. I've already got 3 sitting next to me. I'm going to ask that we hold any substitute motion requests until we've been through the majority of the discussion. Then we can start working our way through the requests. And I'm also going to request, as normal, that any substitute motions be presented to me in writing unless somebody's changing a number from 1 to 3 or something like that. Anything that involves actual verbiage, I'm going to need that in writing. Okay, thank you very much. Discussion.
Well, I like this motion. I just wanted to add a couple of things to it. I wanted to make 2 friendly motions. 2 friendly motions.
Well, why don't you describe what you're looking for, and then we can actually make the motions once discussion is concluded. How's that sound?
125-5, enforcement and remedies, is to add 15 months after the word extended. $15 months. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. We can't hear you.
Did you hear that now, Adam?
I did, but as I was saying, why don't you just describe what you're looking to do, and we can make the actual
I'm looking
substitute motion.
to specify a time, so it can't be 2 weeks.
Okay.
Instead, it's like 15 months, which seems to be a long enough time. I'd say extend it for forever, but I don't think I'm going to get away with that tonight.
I don't think that would work out well in your favor.
The second thing that I'd like to do is add in a little more description up above 125-3 at the end of B from 125-2. So some of this looked to me like it got taken out of the Stockbridge historic demolition delay law that's already been passed in the Commonwealth. And I have the writing here, I'm just going to read it. For the purposes of this paragraph, the term continuing bona fide and reasonable efforts to locate a purchaser shall mean...
That was loud.
It was loud, it sounded like a phone.
I wasn't prepared for that.
Shall mean retaining a licensed broker to market the property in the usual manner over substantially all of the 12-month period, obtaining an appraisal from a reputable appraiser, and providing evidence of good faith in negotiations with potential buyers of the property. These efforts to sell the property should be deemed unsuccessful only upon finding that either there were no offers to purchase the property, that no offer from a willing and reasonably able buyer was for at least the reasonable appraised value of the property, or that no agreement to sell the property pursuant to an offer of at least the reasonable appraised value of the property could be reached despite good faith efforts to do so.
So you're looking to add an extension period for 125-5 and some clarifying specificity language to 125-2. Okay. And then what? Okay. So you'll be first up for the substitute motions. Brandy.
I'm Brandy Kinsman, 6 Lucy French Way. I'm a member of the Select Board. I guess I got to put it even lower. Here we go. Okay. But tonight I'm speaking as an individual citizen with a couple of questions. One, I was doing some research on the Mass Historical Commission's website of the towns that have demo delays and their times. They do a really excellent job of actually laying it all out. Just to see where the changes that the commission is proposing, where it falls in on with other towns and communities. And so I was kind of surprised because there's only one town in the state that has a 24-month delay, and it's Milton. Towns that I would consider generally very historic, like Lexington, Belmont, Lincoln, Cambridge, are all 12-month delays. Towns surrounding us, Holliston, Hopkinton, Sudbury, are 6 months, and Sherburne is not on the list at all. So I was curious to understand the rationale behind where the 24-month delay comes from.
Who would like to respond?
Hi, Helen Nicole for Elliott Circle, Ashland. So the 24-month time frame just came from stronger desire for a stronger delay, demolition delay bylaw. We want Ashland, we want the buildings here to stand, a bit more of a chance so that when people come in and they're looking to buy historic property, this is going to discourage them. Maybe they'll go on to another property. It won't stop them. It won't keep them from doing it. It just gives them a little bit more to think about, and we thought the 24-month time frame was a lot stronger than what we have now.
Okay.
And I just have one more question on section 125-9, where it says the definitions. One of the changes that's being proposed says, for further clarity, the building permit which proposes such changes to historic features or elements of a building or structure may also be determined to fall under this definition. I'm curious what the logistics are for that, because from a standpoint of if a building is 50 years old, and 50 means 1972, which really isn't that old, just ask me. And so I'm trying to understand how, like, if a building permit is filed, how that will actually, what the logistics are and how it gets reviewed and how things get triggered to the Historical Commission.
Right, thank you. Helen, do you want to answer that? You can just stand up there and just be, Helen, why don't you do this? Why don't you come over to this microphone? Or actually, you can stay there. Just, we don't have people going back and forth. The same microphone, make it easier.
I'll go there next time.
Okay.
There's more. Okay, I have to think about it now. I just lost track of the question. So basically what this does, it's going to be the same thing. If you have a historically or architecturally, now you have to remember that there are architectural buildings that might not fall under the same historical qualification. For instance, the Marconi's building would be a building that would have been considered architecturally significant as opposed to historically significant. And this protects elements of the building. So if you're applying for instance, if you wanted to look at the mill buildings and you were just going to take off the mansard roof, that was just part, whatever you wanted to do, not necessarily demolish the whole building, but take down the mansard roof, that would fall under the same qualification that they would have to apply for the demolition delay.
Okay.
Ryan Turncliffe, 21 Rossi Lane, member of the Finance Committee, speaking on my own behalf. Just a clarification probably to that last question. Does a building need to be determined to be historically significant prior to a demolition for this to be in play? And who makes that determination? Is it local? Is it national?
No, it's local. It's the local, and in Ashland, it would be your Ashland Historical Commission, and they would make all those determinations.
So is every single building that gets a request for demolition prior to 1972 and 1973, 4, 5, as we progress, going to come before the commission for determination?
Why don't you let them finish the question?
Okay.
Yeah, I guess that's so a couple things. One is it would make sense to me if this applied strictly to buildings that were determined to be historically significant beforehand and designated either on a local or national register. And the second point is that there's going potentially to be a heavy burden to the commission and to the town to determine what is or isn't historically significant or architecturally meaningful with this type of change to 50 years.
Okay. Well, that's part of their job. They get to decide. And, not every building is going to qualify. So you might have a house that falls within the time frame, but it may have no significance. For instance, if you had a 1950s ranch house, there is nothing really about that house that's significant. They can go with it or they could go against it. But for instance, if, say, a future president, who at the time had just been elected, happened to have lived in that 1950s house, now maybe that 1950s house has a little bit more significance. And that's where the Historical Commission would have the ability to take this into consideration and deem it historically significant. So there's other things that are considered besides just the age. There's a lot. And then there's also architectural significance. So there's a lot of other things that need to be considered, and they have all of that in their toolkit to decide.
Thank you.
Paul?
I actually did want to make some comments.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just answering those.
Okay,
so
now you can start the clock.
I'm kind of curious about, there's already some motions that we don't know about that were made not publicly. I'm not sure about that. I was kind of wondering about that. But also, I did want to...
You can just pause for a second. There weren't motions that weren't made privately. I've been provided motions that will be made. When they're made, they will become officially registered. They were just given to me ahead of time as a courtesy.
Yeah, I was curious about that. Okay. So I just wanted to say that, the Historic Commission does support this. I'm a strong advocate, as you know. I have represented a group, Save the Mill Buildings, that would like to see a bit more historic preservation in Ashland taking place and some more protections for the buildings. And basically, anybody really who, as I said, the Historic Commission supports this, and anybody who supports historic preservation would and should support this. Thank you.
Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Paul Kundle, 6 Rebernacca Road. While I totally support the preservation of historical assets in town, and I do think that our current bylaw needs to be addressed, I have serious concerns about how we're addressing it here, in particularly the modification of the demolition.
Paul, could you move closer to the mic, please?
I couldn't move far enough away before, but so particularly the definition change for demolition expands this past a demolition permit into a building permit, which I think is just inappropriate and confusing. And then also in the modification in 25-5, where they can extend without any parameters or definitions on why they can, and what it means to do good faith efforts, essentially allows them to extend it in perpetuity, which I think is completely inappropriate. And also, given that we had a significant motion to modify already, I've given you 3 of those to strike those 2 sections, but also what I'll be having a motion to do before is to defer this back to the commission so we could have a more robust conversation and add the clarity that I think is necessary for defining all these parameters that are lacking in this, that give it a kind of an arbitrary feel, and it's not clear on how this is going to play out and how it's going to impact all these things. So when the time comes, I'll be making those motions.
Thank you. Brandy, you've had your 1 turn, so you now need to wait till everyone else has had an opportunity. Then you're welcome to come back. Mr. Morgan.
Good evening, Steve Morgan, 136 Concord Street. I'm raising to support the motion as submitted. I think there's a balance here that went into the discussion of how to draft this. I assisted in some aspects gathering information for Helen to draft this information. I think it's important to point out that the existing bylaw already is on the books with these same discussions about what is the role of the Historic Commission. They're responsible to have that hearing and to make those determinations. I'd also point out for folks that are concerned about the time that the bylaw has a 5-year jurisdiction, that's the maximum penalty that can be applied. If you ripped your building down today, it's 5 years. It's no more than 5 years. So when you give jurisdiction to the Historic Commission to manage their business and have what hearings they need to, it was intentionally not a time limit so that it would be in the discretion and decision-making of the Historic Commission. But no more than 5 years. That's the jurisdictional limit that's in the bylaw. I think it's pretty clear, may not have been fully understood. So I make that comment. And then finally, to address the guidelines, I think it would be very useful for the Historic Commission to have guidelines. I think they need those guidelines now. They don't have them in writing. But the decision-making of what is significantly historic or architecture, I think, is in their jurisdiction. They should create those guidelines, much like the design review has done. But we don't have them today, and we have a Historic Commission, and we have a demo delay. So I think we shouldn't stop this improvement of the bylaw over something that's already in the town. Thank you.
Catherine Jerzyk, 11 Rodman Road. I'm speaking in favor of this, and I just pretty much want to encourage and second the things that Helen and Steve had said about that. We already have this, so people that are questioning it seem like they're wanting to go all the way back and revisit that, and I think that's really disappointing in our community. We're simply trying to get a little more teeth in something. So if you don't care for historic preservation, you will vote against this. If you care for historic preservation, I simply ask you to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Crow. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry. You look like Preston from a distance. Put my glasses on.
I don't know if I make Preston.
I understand.
Okay. Aaron Ladd, 153 Pleasant Street. I'll actually stand up in opposition to this, I think, for unintended consequences. While we are talking about historical preservation, I actually think this goes against affordable housing. This will increase the costs of development. It will limit the number of opportunities that developers will have to build affordable housing. And I think this will be an unintended consequence of putting an unfair burden on reducing the number of properties available for redevelopment in the next 5, 10 years, whatever. So I don't think the town is thinking about how this will impact the number of land parcels available for a developer to actually be profitable, to do affordable housing, to make changes, to do development And I think that will be the unintended consequence. It's not about whether you're protecting historical preservation. There are teeth for that, but I think this is going to change a lot of the thoughts about, hey, do I want to do business in Ashland, or are the costs too expensive and I can't afford to convert an older home into a duplex or to put in a couple houses in, and I don't see anywhere in here that that's being considered. And I know affordable housing is a big consideration in Ashland, and I hope that voters consider that that will be an unintended consequence of this change.
Thank you. Ms. Kendall?
Tricia Kendall, 6 Rebenecker Road. As many of you know, I've been a registered architect in Massachusetts for over 20 years. I do care very much about historic preservation, and as such, I think also that relates to the LEED accreditation I hold. But I too will be voting against this motion. I think it may be very good to strengthen this bylaw down the road and to really understand what we're getting into. But I think this has been rushed a bit in putting it forward, and there are just some things that don't make sense to me. One of the big ones is the 50-year. I think this puts a lot of, it just gives me pause. I think this puts a lot of constraint on individual homeowners. Most of us have homes that aren't brand new, that are at least several decades into this 50 years. And I wonder about the turning over of individual property rights, especially with homeowners, but also with buildings, just commercial buildings as well, to a committee. I think this is just going a little too far, and I think it needs to be reviewed a little bit more before we take a look at making something this strong. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, is it you or is it Lisa? Mr. Herbert?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So I support strengthening our bylaw, but as an administrator, I have some real concerns with the definitions where it does say, for further clarity, any building permit which proposes such changes to the historic features or elements of a building or structure may also be determined to fall under this definition. Mr. Turncliffe had brought up the point that any demo application that comes in, who would be making this determination? I think I need to really point out that the way this reads, it's not any demo permit, it's any building permit that comes before the building commissioner, which is roughly 1,000 of them a year. He'll need to make that determination as to whether or not there is a change to a historic feature or element of the building or structure. I don't know how somebody determines, I mean, is it up to him to determine what's a historic feature or element of a building? What does that mean? Is that trim? Is that a door? Is that a sconce? Take it further. If there is a non-historical building or something that was built in 2010, and there's a historic, like somebody wants to use an archway or an old archway or an old mantle, or not mantle, but some historical feature, and then put it on that building, does that mean when a building permit comes forward, does that mean that it needs to be sent for review? I don't think it provides the further clarity that it hopes to provide.
Thank you. Helen, as with Brandy, you've had your opportunity, so you're welcome to speak after everyone else had an opportunity. Okay. Would you mind just taking a seat so others can come up there? Thank you. Mr. Crow.
Preston Crow, 41 Rockwood. I am supporting this. I think what this comes down to is we've had a number of historic properties in town where the buildings have been demolished. There was a big survey of all our historical buildings a number of years ago, and many of those properties on that are no longer standing. And in reaction to the town manager's point, I'm aware of one historic house right now that has been basically stripped to the bones in a refurbishing. They're not demolishing it, but they might as well be. So there are a number of specific cases that this would apply to, that would improve protection of historic properties. And I think we need this or something very much like this. And the longer we wait, the more properties we will lose. So I would support passing this tonight. And if there are improvements that could be made, they could tweak this at a future town meeting. But I'd say go ahead with what we have now.
Thank you.
Erin Williams, 11 Arene Circle. My home is 52 years old, and so we went through a very real situation when we moved into the home in 2019, where we could have needed to demolish it due to severe hoarding and mold infestation. And if this bylaw were in place at the time, that would have been a very big expense forced upon us, potentially, for mold remediation and other things, for what's just a run-of-the-mill Garrison Colonial. But just having to go through that whole process with the Historical Commission. The gentleman from Pleasant Street made a very good point, and I think that's my point, and I think Preston, what he just said, I'm thinking, of the same house downtown. I'm excited. There's a house on Main Street that is finally getting a facelift, and those are the houses that we should maybe be protecting, but they need a little facelift. We want beautification downtown. We've gone over everything that Michael presented earlier about 126 and all the signage and the streetlights and whatnot downtown. This seems like way too much red tape and an overreach and an overstep of the Historical Commission.
Thank you.
Loretta Rivera, Alsing, 27 Rassy Lane.
May I just hang on 1 second?
Sure.
I'm going to ask anyone else who has a comment to please make their way forward. Those who have second comments, just hang on. But if you're not in line in about 10 seconds, 15 if you're up top, we're going to close the lines off. I'm sorry for the interruption. Go ahead.
No worries. Did you stop the clock?
Restart the clock, please. Thank you for asking.
I support the amendment. We do have a lot of historical buildings that have been demolished, and if there is anything in here that is not clear, then we have to go back to the town and have whatever word is not clear to everybody. We will ask the Historical Commission to explain or, to clarify it in the bylaw. But for now, I think the longer we wait, the more historical buildings will be demolished in support of progress. I don't want any more not so good-looking apartment buildings, especially on Main Street. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Alexis Christopher, 435 Captain Ames Circle. This whole thing about the 50 years really concerns me, and I would like to see it go back to the Historical Commission and look at what it could affect other things that are 35 or 40 years old now, that in 10 years will be covered under this. Most of especially the architectural things, there isn't a lot of good architecture in the last 25 or 30 years. There are some, but a lot of the standard houses aren't, and so it concerns me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marcel Barjona, 51 Wadsworth Road. Just a simple comment. I'm also a registered architect. I've worked for a long time on a number of buildings, some of them actually historically listed. And for some of the comments that have been made before, I will be voting against this proposal because I think sounds to me like the solution is, or the cure is getting worse than the disease. I think I agree with the idea that the Historical Commission will be better served using their time determining what buildings are actually architecturally significant or what districts need to be protected, and then go with the rules to protect those. Having a shotgun approach to cover the entire town with a 50-year kind of covering everything, I think is going to be a burden to the administrators, to the commissions, and is going to create a lot of unintended consequences, which I agree has been said before. So I don't think it's a good idea. It should be perhaps reviewed a little bit further and maybe written down in a different fashion.
Thank you.
Junkin Friday, One Shore Road. I joined the mill building group because I was very concerned about the mill buildings being torn down in town of Ashland. I think it would change the entire town, the picture of the town. It's a beautiful town, and I think I'd like to see historic buildings and the structure of the town stay. And I think that, well, maybe 50 years needs to be tweaked at some point. I think maybe that I would like to see this pass and have the Historic Commission come back and tweak it if it needs to be tweaked. But I think we need something more robust right now before more buildings are gone. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this ends regular discussion. Now we'll go back to, because you're right, we'll go back to for seconds. Brandy, you're up. Wait. Oh, I'm sorry. With the mask, it's hard for me. Okay, sorry. My apologies.
Janet Platt, 11 Rodman Road. I'm hearing a lot of fear in people's interpretations of this bill that really doesn't change a lot of what we already do in Ashland. And it just tells me that I don't think there's an understanding of what the Historical Commission already does. The Historical Commission is already tasked with deciding. They have procedures. They have ways of doing business. They don't just sit around and go, I wonder if this one's historic. There are criteria. I'm going to vote for this because I think it just gives them a little bit more to work with than they've had before. In pursuit of the same mission they've been trying to pursue, and that's preserving a little bit of our history.
Brandy.
So going back to the definitions, the 125-9, I wanted to share from someone who couldn't be here tonight, who has a historic home that's over 100 years old. And recently she had to pull her porch off of her historic home because it was literally undermining her foundation. And literally her house would have crumbled. And she has, like I said, a historic home here in Ashland, did everything to preserve her historic sense, had an architect. But given the way that this is currently written, that situation would have triggered a 24-month demolition delay. So I think that there is absolutely unintended consequences. I think that the intention of Helen, the Historical Commission, I firmly support the historical preservation of our buildings. I don't think this is crafted in a way that is the best for our community. So I would suggest to the Historical Commission that they go back and they rework some of this, because the language there, when you talk about issues like could siding or a porch or a roof trigger a demolition delay that could actually affect homeowners and residents here in town. So I firmly believe that there's a way to strengthen this bylaw. I just don't think that this is particularly the way to do it. So thank you.
Thank you. Helen? Oh, yeah. Have you spoken before? We closed initial comments.
I'm responding to, I can't respond?
There wasn't a question asked.
For the Historical Commission, there's no response?
There was no question asked.
Okay.
Okay, so I just wanted to add that there are over 1,200 cities and towns in the country using the 50-year rule. And off the top of my head, and I didn't bring a list, I can think of Newton, Concord, and Stockbridge that use the 50-year rule. And again, the Historic Commission already does this. This is just a little bit added tooth to what they already do. It really hasn't, it changes the time frame a little bit, but it doesn't change what they do. They still get to decide, and it gives the person who might be coming along and buying a property a little bit more to think about. It doesn't stop anybody. It would not affect affordable housing, because a developer who wants to come in and buy it is still probably going to do that anyway. It just takes a little bit longer. Hopefully he'd consider a different property. The one thing that it does do that adds a little bit more teeth to it is it strengthens that when someone owns or has a historic property or an architecturally significant property that they want to tear down, and they apply for a demolition, application for demolition delay, they are supposed to prove that they can somehow go about changing, if they own the property, they're going to have to look for somebody to either buy the property or for other ways to mitigate it so they don't have to take the building down. This makes them prove it. This is just something they already do, but it gives them more time so that if they haven't done it, they have more time to do it.
And before I get to you, Paul, was there someone else who had a second comment? No. Paul, go ahead. You're invoking town manager rights? Okay.
I'm just asking them to restate it.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just want to restate, first of all, I support a large part of these components here, but the one that I have a concern about is the piece that says, for further clarity, any building permit which proposes such changes to the historic features or elements of a building or structure may also be determined to fall under this definition. I want to be clear, this does not mean that a demo permit would trigger all of this. This means that anytime a building permit is applied for, there has to be some level of discretion on our staff's part to figure out what is a historic feature or element, and then decide to move that forward to the Historical Commission. It's going to be a challenge to implement, and I just want to restate, it's not just a demo application that's submitted, it's a building permit application that's submitted.
Okay. I'm going to invoke moderator's rights here. Council, do you have anything that might inform the body this evening? If you want to say no, that's fine too, but I just want to give the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I did provide my comments to the Historic Commission last week or the week before. I'm concerned about, based upon the cases that I've read and the opinions of the Attorney General, approving adoption of similar demolition delay bylaws in Massachusetts. I'm concerned about the vagueness of the standard in Section 125-5 about good faith efforts. I'm concerned about the open-ended nature of the period by which something may be told, and I'm concerned about the lack of definition of historic features or elements of a building or structure, and I believe that those items will be flagged by the Attorney General.
Thank you, Counsel. Mr. Kendall.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'd just like to reiterate, I do applaud the efforts. I think the citizens petition brings this to light. I think it's something that we do need to address, and I support addressing it. But for some of the reasons that Council just stated, 25-9 and 25-5 really change things. So 25-5, for all the reasons Council just stated, is just inappropriate. And then 25-9, where it changes that definition, now this is not just about a demolition permit, it's about all building permits, which I think expands the scope dramatically. And so, again, I support changes. I just think that this needs to go back and do that. So I have three, I was the one that supplied three motions to you, so I don't know how you're going to want to address them, but the motions were to strike those two sections that we just outlined, and the third one was to refer it back to the Historical Commission for the refinement and clarity on some of these things. So I don't know when we're going to address that, but thank you.
Kathy, you get the last word. Helen's already had 2 bites of the apple. That's the limit in our procedures. I can't hear a word you're saying. You can come up to the microphone and say what you're going to say. I just can't hear you.
I wanted to make the motion to scrap that paragraph. Substitute motion, I guess. I wasn't sure if it was a motion or a substitute to scrap for further clarity any building permit which proposes such changes.
That was one of mine, so.
Okay, so it sounds like Paul's already got it covered.
Okay.
Excuse me one moment.
So if Paul made a motion to refer, just so you know, it's a priority motion.
It's going to be the first one. Okay, Kathy, last.
I think if you scroll down 125-4, scroll up, sorry, right here, emergency demolition. So in the case that you have a porch coming off a house or some other emergency thing that gets to be done, then that would apply. The owner would go to the building inspector and say, hey, I've got a historic house, but I've got this other problem, and I'm pretty sure that the building inspector would win the day and they could make their emergency demolitions. That's all. Thank you.
All right, we have 5 substitute motions that I'm going to try to work through. There are orders of priority of various motions, and we go with the highest priority first. The first priority motion has been made. Is there a second to that motion? Second. What will happen now is we will have discussion on this substitute motion. After discussion on this substitute motion, we will vote on the substitute motion. If the substitute motion passes, the article will be referred back, and we will be done discussion on Article 9. If this motion fails, then we will move on to the next priority substitute motion and work through. So discussion on the motion to refer back Article 9 to this article.
So I would like to make a substitute motion to add 15 months.
You can't make a substitute motion at this point. We're debating the motion to dismiss, to refer back. It's the highest priority motion there is. If the motion fails, we'll go through all the substitute motions. But a motion to refer back is a higher priority than any other substitute motion. Mr. Morgan?
Good evening. I'd just like to observe that the Historic Commission and the Citizens article are currently in the same language, which is probably a little bit rare. I've been to a couple of these Historical Commission meetings, and I know everybody in this room had the opportunity to go to those meetings and did not necessarily go. So those who don't think they like the current bylaw, as written, I think there's a great deal of comments here about the current bylaw that's active today. And I think we need to separate what's active today from what's being changed, in our minds. So I think a lot of discussion has gone into the Historical Commission. I don't think they necessarily need to do it over. Certainly if there's some improvements by motion, that would make sense to get this improvement of the protection in place. There have been many cases where buildings have not been protected. And to those who are concerned about all buildings, this is not about all 50-year-old buildings. This is about architectural or historic buildings. So every 50-year-old building, every building permit is not what we're talking about here. It would be a very easy matter for the town to add a checkbox to its existing building permit form based on the age and have the appropriate people do an assessment. It's not a big burden. Those forms are revised on occasion. I'm sure that the building inspector could recommend such a checkbox. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
I just want to say that I don't agree with this motion, that there's already another subsequent motion to add in 15 months, a second time frame for that, and that's
It's a matter of procedure.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, I just want it to be known that I don't agree with this.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, Jim Nielsen again, Historical Commission. I'd just like to reiterate that we're not, we have spent a lot of time discussing this. We're not, if somebody's grandmother's porch falls off and she lives in a historic building, we're not going to delay that from being fixed. We've had many buildings, we've had several buildings come before us where they were over 100 years old, and we permitted them to be demolished because there was no historical value. And that's a case-by-case judgment. In no way is this trying to prevent people from, fixing their house or that kind of thing. And I understand that there's some things that can be tweaked, and I agree with that at some points. And I think that instead of sending it back to the Historical Commission, I think we might be able to get that done tonight so that this can move forward. Thank you.
Mr. Penny.
So this is my motion, and I have those motions as well. I guess my concern with doing the other motions is we have several of them, and that to do these things on the floor, you could have unintended consequences again, and to steal somebody else's face. The cure can be worse than the disease once you do things on the floor. So
I would caution us to do too many modifications on the floor unless we're just doing striking the changes, because I believe what the other motion that was read before is a substantive change to 25-5, which would, I think it needs more time and energy put into to make sure that it's doing what we want. So I would either be in favor of referring it back or just striking and not making other substantive changes. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion made and seconded. I'm going to now ask for a vote on the substitute motion, which would refer Article 9 back to the Historical Commission. All those in favor, please raise your blue cards. All those opposed? I guess I'm going to have to count. We have the tellers. Are they still here? Susan's here. Yeah, a couple of you. I only need two of you. You could have come down, Susan. I'm going to ask. Wherever possible, I want to try to get it as right as we can get it. So we're going to take that count again using tellers, and we'll make sure we hand count everything as opposed to me trying to eyeball the numbers. So all those in favor, please, all those in favor of the motion to refer this back to the Historical Commission, please raise your cards and keep them raised until I let you know. Thank you. You all set? Thank you. All those opposed to the motion to refer it back to the Historical Commission, raise your cards, please. I have fingers and toes. Okay. Thank you. So, the middle section. By a vote of 40 to 34, the motion passes and the articles refer back to the Historical Commission. Article 10, update Chapter 125, Demolition Delay Bylaw for historically or architecturally significant properties, sponsored by the citizen petition. Given the subject matter was debated and voted on in Article 9, I'll entertain a motion to dismiss Article 10. Do I have such a motion? Second. All in favor? Discussion? All those in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed? That passes, but not unanimously. Article 11, approve sustainability framework sponsored by the Sustainability Committee. To see if the town will vote to adopt the strategic framework for achieving net zero emission by 2040 developed by the Sustainability Committee, as is printed in your handbook. The Finance Committee defers its recommendation to town meeting. From the Sustainability Committee, Ash. After the introduction. Sorry, Ash.
Thank you. So we've been working on this for a while, so I'm going to try and summarize all the work we've done, at least lay out the broad outlines of the strategy, and then leave you guys to make the decision you need to. Michael, if you don't mind moving forward. Just as a quick reminder, we adopted as a town the resolution to achieve net zero by 2040, and at that time the Select Board charged the Sustainability Committee to come up with a plan to try and achieve that goal. And in an attempt to really do this in a very thoughtful manner, in a very data-driven manner, we initially started with a lot of engagement with best practice groups like the MAPC and RMI, and completed a greenhouse gas inventory of the town to try and understand where our emissions do come from. Based on both those inputs, we've now we have pulled together a strategy. Rather than coming back to the town with an entire plan, that likely requires a lot more input from a number of additional stakeholders that we did not feel were represented within the Sustainability Committee. What we've chosen to do is present a strategy framework that will allow us to move towards the right direction while still being very thoughtful about individual elements of the plan that can be developed by the right people, but can be guided by the larger strategy. Strategy that we've chosen is reflected in best practices, and I'll quickly take you through it. Thank you, Mike. This is just a quick view. A number of you have seen this. We've done a number of open forums as well as public reviews of this content. So I'm not going to drain this too much, but basically what the greenhouse gas inventory showed us, not surprisingly for a town of our size, is that the vast majority of our emissions come from either buildings, either commercial or residential, or from transportation. We've got a thin slice of municipal production, obviously, because we've got some of the larger buildings. So that's kind of what the entry points for our strategy are. Michael, if you can move on. So the overall framework talks about achieving net zero through either education, adaptation, investment, and then transformation. Education is really about measuring and understanding the baselines that we have to work with, as well as what goals we ought to be setting for ourselves. That includes the things like the greenhouse gas inventory, and then adapting our behavior so that without making massive investments, we are able to make adjustments, micro adjustments, so that we're able to achieve the goal. Eventually, however, the problem is large enough that we're going to have to make investments. And that's partly why this plan wasn't converted into a plan. Those investments require a lot more thoughtful review, but they will likely be large, both on the municipal front as well as the personal capital front. This framework effectively helps us guide towards that. And then eventually we get to the transformation we want. To try and achieve those emission goals, though, we basically focused on 5 pillars. The first pillar really focuses on our energy supply. So Michael, if you don't mind, I'll just take us through the pillars itself, right? So on our energy supply, you can keep moving, just in the interest of time. So on our energy supply, clearly, if we have to achieve net zero, we have to effectively eliminate some form of fossil fuel consumption in the town. Without eliminating fossil fuels, we cannot possibly achieve net zero. So we looked at that and we said the easiest way for us to do that is to look at electricity. Unfortunately, there is no one clean source of energy, but electricity is the only known source of energy that has the ability to become fully renewable. That chart right there shows you where electricity is consistently becoming the second largest. The production of electricity is now being done by renewable sources. That's the second largest component of electricity supply comes from renewables. Electricity then becomes a core part of our strategy. So you'll notice now, if you move on to the next slide, when we start looking at our homes and buildings, today we only about 2% of our buildings really rely on electricity for their entire energy use. So 72% rely on natural gas and 26% rely on oil. What our goals here would be to slowly but surely, and in a very thoughtful way, shift buildings towards electric usage only, which is partly supported by the resolution that we passed last town meeting, to try and push the state to actually change the building code so that we are increasing the amount of electric requirements in new buildings. We are within this comprehending a number of individual line items that we'll have to debate individually that will allow us to transition older homes as well towards electrification. If we move on. The next piece that we would have to tackle is transportation, really moving towards electric infrastructure. And while the production of electric vehicles is becoming far more normal right now, with a number of major companies effectively committing to make their fleets completely electric, the pieces that we will need to focus on is ensuring that we have the infrastructure to be able to charge those vehicles, to make that accessible for not just homeowners, but also residents in HOAs and in condo communities, but also be thoughtful about, as a municipality, how we're going to increase that electric infrastructure, making investment in things like, potentially changing our school buses, for example, to electric, which really is a great use case. Moving on. Next one really starts looking at climate zoning and planning. We have been working very closely with members of the planning board. A lot of work is going into it. So as a follow-through on this, we will be presenting thoughts around what things we can do within the planning zone, but really the strategies here focus on that. It's a very well-documented fact that as we start looking at different pieces of that planning puzzle, that there are substantial improvements we can make within our current bylaws and current rules itself that allow us to move towards a far more sustainable future. Eventually, we are going to have to really work with the state and at the federal level to make changes that are far more instrumental. Moving on. And then finally, while all of this can be fairly overwhelming, not all the means of addressing climate change have to require investments in technology. A big portion of this is nature-based. Net zero is about netting out our emissions. So as long as we're able to reduce our emissions and somehow increase the ability for us to sink those emissions, into carbon sources, clearly through preservation of our natural resources already, improving a tree canopy, or changing the way we consume, right? Reducing the amount of plastic, for example, we consume, or maybe even reduce the amount of meat that we consume. A lot of those things can help us make the right adjustments so that as we reduce our emissions, we also are able to absorb a lot more, and that'll get us to that balance, because there's no way we're going to go to completely zero. So as a final slide, what we are proposing in Article 11 is establishing these strategies that we've identified. We've been, again, publishing this. We've had a number of public review meetings. It's been on the website as well, so hopefully you've had a chance to look through it. But setting that document as the North Star document. The development of the individual action plans will still need to come back to this body or to the other relevant bodies for approval. We're not looking for investment right now, but just setting that strategic goal for the town, and then establishing a governance model to ensure that we are able to report and approve these action plans appropriately. And then we are requesting that sustainability considerations be incorporated into any multi-year strategic planning project. We had to work, and we've had some very open conversations with some of the big buildings that came out. A number of those committees were very open to getting input from sustainability, but we'd like to see that becoming almost a requirement for anything larger. Certainly, I've put that challenge in front of in front of the town management, saying you kind of have to do it. I will clarify again, the adoption of Article 11 does not allocate any investments, and it certainly does not circumnavigate any existing rules or established policy. All it's doing is setting up a strategy for us to follow through on. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. To allow discussion, I'll entertain a motion that the town approve the resolution as presented. Do I have such a motion?
Second.
Okay. Mr. Scherer, on behalf of the Select Board.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm pleased very pleased on behalf of the Select Board to endorse and support this article. This is a process, as I think many of you are aware, that we started several years ago to achieve net zero carbon emissions in our community by 2040. What you're being asked to vote on tonight is not a specific measure, but rather, as Ash said, a resolution for a framework that will charge not only the Sustainability Committee, but the Select Board, the Planning Board, and indeed our entire community to continue to try to address what I think many of us realize is one of the most pressing, if not the most critical issue of our time, and that, of course, is fighting climate change. So that is something that our the community has resolved to do through this process, and we urge that you vote in the affirmative to set this framework in place. Thank you.
Additional discussion? Whoever gets here first. Run, run. And they hesitate at the end. Ma'am.
Again, Florida River Housing, 27 Rassy Lane. I'm all for, making sure our environment is protected. I'm just wondering, did that presentation went through the town officers, like the select board and everything? Because it's very, it's not so easy to digest the information that was just presented. What is the cost to the town to have that implemented? I wish we have as robust discussion as we had for the preservation of the old buildings, because that gives me comfort that a lot of thought is being made by the town, and the town, the employees and the select board, that a lot of thought is being made when things are being changed within our town. So that's my question. What is the total cost of this? Did the town, the select board especially, had a chance to review this, and they are really in full agreement of whatever the big words that were used during the presentation?
So I believe Mr. Scheer just stated that the select board was enthusiastically in favor of this article. Is there something beyond that you were looking for? If there is, we can try to get it.
Yeah, my number one question is, what would be the cost to the town of
the cost of adopting this?
Yes.
Okay. Ash, would you like to take a shot at that?
The cost of achieving net zero, honestly, I don't think I can answer that question completely, but the cost of adopting this resolution is going to be zero. As I stated, we're not looking for any investment. What we're really looking for is making sure that the decisions that we make in the future around investments consider sustainability as a factor. So I can give you one small example. If let's assume that we were to build a brand new public safety building, which we are building, right? One of the things that happened during the building process itself, right, in the planning process, was we started thinking about how we're going to heat and cool that building. And a lot of input was taken in. As a sustainability committee, we had to almost come in from the back door. We had a lot of interested people asking us questions, but we had to kind of stand up really hard and wave our hands and say, you really must consider sustainability. And then the good news is that the town really took that in, and they adopted a lot of those sustainability measures into that decision. What we're looking for to doing here is making that part of the rule book to say, as you make those decisions, think about the sustainability impacts, because if you're building a brand new building right now, it's going to live for the next 60 years, 55 years, 60 years, 100 years, and the cost of those things is going to continue onwards. We don't have the ability to skip that step of not thinking about sustainability up front. That said, we did not feel ourselves to be qualified to be making a large, huge decision on the basis of the town to say, go do this, this, or this. So that's why we, instead of coming up with a plan, what we proposed is the set of strategies that would act as the guidelines for anyone making those decisions. Any of those decisions would still come back through the right review process, back either into town meeting with the finance committee, making those assessments and then giving us the right guidance. Did that answer your question?
Thank you, Ash. Mr. Morgan?
Yeah, good evening. So real quick on this, I'm very concerned about this article, firstly because the article doesn't have any attachments. It reads like there's an attachment or an agreement to adopt something that isn't in the text. Certainly that presentation is not in the text. That's a concern. I'm also very concerned that this group who talks about sustainability, I'm for sustainability and smart sustainability, but this group, as an example, has failed to put minutes up for its activities for a year and a half. I had to get those minutes, some of them just last week. So a group that's meeting to make major changes, that could even be charter changes. We're creating a committee
of the Select Board and the sustainability. It's not even clear that's allowed in the charter. And
Could we
here have
focus, please, Mr. Morgan?
And again, I got 47 seconds, but I'll stay on
I
topic.
just asked you to focus and stay on subject.
Yep. So I think it's very concerning. There's very little here. There's no cost. There's no plan. It's not clear that 2040 is the right year, whether it's 2035 or 2050. So until something gets baked and people work on stuff, we just sent something back to historic, which was well-baked, and we wouldn't take it up. So I think this should go back to sustainability until they come up with a complete presentation with rules and guidance and things people can actually see before it gets voted on. That's my view, and I would offer the substitute motion to send this back to committee.
Hold on to that substitute motion, please, till discussion's ended. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chuck Lids. I'm at 150 Oregon Road, and I am the vice chair of the Sustainability Committee, so obviously I'm in favor of this. I want to say something in general. If we all agree, or almost all agree, that climate change is a serious crisis, as the Select Board has said, we need to do this. And you can say, well, you know, China isn't doing this. And I want to go back to something I learned when I studied ethics, which is you can't criticize other people for something you won't do. We've got to commit to this because this is the crisis of our time. Now, is this framework perfect? This framework is going to have some issues. We need support from the state, we're going to need support from the federal government, and we're going to need, of course, the involvement of the entire town. This is only meant to be a framework. It's not yet a plan. It is trying to tell the town as a whole where we think we need to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion, Mr. Magnani? Are you speaking on behalf of the Select Board or yourself?
I'll be speaking on behalf of the Public Safety Building.
I didn't know the building could speak. No, go ahead.
Thank you. As the chair of the Public Safety Building Committee, we thought long and hard and had many discussions with respect to how we, like Ash said, how we were going to power the building and how we were going to heat it. I'm very proud to say that Ashland is the first town in Massachusetts to have a geothermal heating system in a public safety building. We are the first. That doesn't mean we're going to be the last, but we are the first. We're taking baby steps. We're also within the time frame and within the budget structure, we also have the availability to put solar panels in to help generate the electricity to run the building. So to ask the young lady's question as to how much is it going to cost, I don't know, because it's already built into the budget of our design, but I can tell you down the road it's going to save our community money. How much, I don't know, but the steps are there, the stages are there, and hopefully we'll see that from a year-to-year basis once we move into that building. Thank you, Master Chair.
Thank you.
Hi, Matt Marshquist, 12 Weston Road. I'm a member of the Sustainability Committee. I just wanted to speak to a couple points. Although we don't have it printed out here, we're perhaps a little too green. The full plan framework has been on the website of the town for some time now, and we've been getting good feedback from people, and we've had open forums about it, and we've gone to meetings of various different committees throughout town to try to get really direct feedback in this time of COVID on the parts of the plan that related to those committees. So it's been well reviewed. I also want to, I think it was great what you said about the public safety building, because that's been my experience. I think there are parts of this plan that will cost money. Generally, the rule with sustainability investments is that you pay more up front and then there's a payoff period. So if you're paying for a net zero building, which we're not necessarily saying all buildings in town have to be net zero, but you do pay more for that up front, and then you save money with the energy investment. Finally, there are other elements of this plan that will save money without having to spend any more money. The incentives that the state may provide to residents will hopefully be a saving to them right up front. And in some cases, you can build a building now that has electric heat and is well insulated, and it's not necessarily any more expensive than a traditional building, but it would save the residents of that building money from the beginning. So I think the rule is, you pay now or pay later, and we want people to begin thinking about paying now instead of pushing these costs off onto future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, we have a substitute motion to Mr. Morgan made, and let me make sure I got this right, to refer Article 11 back to the Sustainability Committee. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Moderator. I'd first like you to rule on whether the motion is in order without having the attachment. It's very clear there's a long attachment that is not printed in the warrant, which people are asking us to vote on. I think that's improper procedure. I'd like you to make a comment on that as moderator, whether that's an allowable procedure to vote on something that was not submitted with the warrant.
The budget isn't in the warrant either, and that's perfectly appropriate as long as it's posted publicly.
Where is it publicly?
It's on the town's website.
I couldn't even find minutes from this group last week of their meetings for a year and a half.
I can only speak to the statement that the proposal is on the website. I can't speak to the minutes.
All right, thank you. I'm just asking the question.
And I'm just providing the answer to the best I can. So the substitute motion is to refer Article, I keep getting the number wrong, 11 back to the Sustainability Commission. We'll vote on that first. If the motion passes, the article will be referred back, and that'll be that. If the article fails, we move on to discussion of a vote on the article since discussion is concluded, remembering that a vote in favor of the substitute motion means the article is referred back and no action is taken tonight. A vote opposed to the substitute motion means that we will be discussing the article a little further or voting on the article. So all those in favor of the substitute motion to refer the article back to the Sustainability Committee, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed? The motion fails. I see someone has a white card. I can't count that white card. Okay, I can count that blue card. That motion fails. Discussion, let's make a note here. Since discussion was concluded on the article, we'll now vote on the motion that was made and seconded to approve the resolution as presented. All those in favor of Article 11, please raise your cards. Thank you. It requires a simple majority. Opposed? That article passes. There be no further business. I'll entertain a motion to dissolve. All in favor, raise your cards. Anybody opposed? And if so, why? Thank you and good night.